In the quiet town of Derry, Maine, where the shadows of the past often linger longer than they should, I found myself ensnared in a chilling mystery that threatened to unravel the fabric of my sanity. 5 years ago, my neighbor Charles, a tall man with a gaunt face and eyes that always seemed to be searching for something, informed the community of his 14-year-old son's sudden disappearance. The news spread like wildfire, with whispers and rumors filling the void left by the boy's absence. My wife Sarah and I always tried to be pillars of support for Charles and his wife Kathy during those tumultuous times. As the years rolled on, with no word of their son, the atmosphere around Charles's home grew increasingly heavy. The once vibrant Kathy became a shadow of her former self, her eyes hollow, and Charles, well, he seemed to be perpetually on edge. Their once frequent barbecues became rare, and when they did happen, they were somber affairs. One evening, as the sun cast long, eerie shadows, Charles approached me, his voice quivering, asking to borrow a shovel. Without a second thought, I handed him my best one. But as I watched him from my upstairs window, digging fervently in his backyard, a sense of unease settled over me. The hole he was digging seemed far too large for any ordinary task. Driven by a mix of concern and curiosity, I decided to offer my help. But as I approached, Charles's demeanor shifted. His eyes, wide with what seemed like fear, met mine. "Leave," he hissed, pointing towards my house. The intensity of his reaction left me stunned. That night, as the world around me was enveloped in darkness, I was awakened by the unmistakable sound of a shovel striking the earth. Peering through my window, I saw Charles, illuminated only by the pale moonlight, digging once again. Seizing the moment, I sneaked into his yard, only to discover a black garbage bag at the bottom of the hole. My heart raced as I considered the grim possibilities. The next morning, the hole was gone, replaced by freshly turned earth. Charles's SUV, which usually sat in his driveway, was now parked on the street. The weight of suspicion bore down on me. Had Charles buried evidence of a terrible crime, or was there something even more sinister at play? Days turned into nights, and a palpable tension hung in the air. Charles avoided me, but I could feel his eyes on me, watching, always watching. One afternoon, as I glanced out of my window, our eyes met. His gaze, cold and unyielding, sent shivers down my spine. That night, as I lay in bed, the room grew cold. A soft, mournful whisper echoed through the silence. "Help me?" The spectral voice of a young boy, filled with pain and longing, resonated in the stillness. The room was bathed in an ethereal glow, and the faint outline of a boy appeared, pointing towards Charles's house. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The spirit of Charles's son was reaching out, seeking closure. The paranormal activity intensified over the next few days. Objects moved on their own, and chilling apparitions became a common occurrence. Driven by a newfound purpose, I decided to confront Charles. As I approached his home, the atmosphere grew thick with dread. The door creaked open to reveal Charles, his face pale and eyes bloodshot. "I know," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I've seen him too." In a heart-wrenching confession, Charles revealed that his son had accidentally died in their home. Overwhelmed by grief and fear of judgment, they had buried him in the backyard, but the guilt had consumed them, and they had recently moved the body, hoping to give him a proper burial. United by our shared experiences, Charles and I decided to hold a small memorial for his son. As we stood by the freshly dug grave, a soft breeze rustled the leaves, and for a brief moment, the faint outline of a boy appeared, smiling, before fading away, finally at peace. The paranormal occurrences ceased, but the weight of the past remained. Charles and Kathy moved away shortly after, seeking a fresh start, but the memories of that fateful summer will forever haunt the corners of my mind, a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead. In the haunting town of Derry, Maine, where whispers of the past echo through the trees and shadows play tricks on the mind, I've resided in 3 distinct homes. The first was a grand Victorian mansion, its walls echoing with memories of a bygone era. The second was a cozy bungalow, filled with the laughter and warmth of family. And now I find solace in a secluded cabin on the outskirts, surrounded by the dense woods that have always seemed to hold Derry's darkest secrets. The Victorian house, with its creaking floors and drafty rooms, was where my most chilling memories were forged. Our neighborhood was mostly quiet, with families keeping to themselves, their children playing in their own yards. But the house next door was different. It was inhabited by two boys, Eric and Todd, and their father, a man who seemed perpetually lost in thought, his gaze always distant, as if haunted by some unseen specter. Eric and Todd were enigmatic. They moved silently, their pale faces often expressionless, and they seemed to have an uncanny ability to appear and disappear without a sound. My younger brother and I, despite our proximity, had only exchanged words with them on rare occasions. Their presence was always accompanied by a cold, eerie aura, as if they were constantly surrounded by an invisible mist. One fateful evening, as the sun's golden rays began to wane and the world was painted in twilight hues, my brother and I were engrossed in a game of basketball. Out of the blue, Todd approached us. His voice, which always seemed to carry an otherworldly echo, inquired about the rumors of our impending move. I confirmed, curious about his sudden interest. As our conversation meandered, Todd extended an invitation. He wanted us to join him and Eric in the woods the next day for some BB gun shooting. Those woods, as every Derry child knew from whispered tales, were haunted. Stories of spirits, apparitions, and creatures that defied explanation were passed down through generations. But, driven by a mix of teenage bravado and curiosity, we agreed. The following day, under a sky painted with ominous clouds, we met the brothers at the forest's edge. Their attire, military-style camo gear, seemed oddly serious for a simple BB gun outing. As we ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere grew thick, almost suffocating. The trees seemed to close in on us, their branches like twisted arms reaching out. Every so often, an inexplicable cold spot would make us shiver, as if we'd walked through a ghost. When Todd finally unveiled the guns, my heart sank. These weren't mere BB guns. They were real, deadly firearms. Eric, his eyes wild with a mix of excitement and madness, began firing recklessly at the trees. The sound echoed, each shot amplifying my growing dread. I acted swiftly, grabbing the weapons and declaring our departure. As we hastily retreated, I couldn't shake off the sensation of being watched, not just by the boys, but by the very woods themselves. That night, as the wind howled outside, I was jolted awake by a chilling draft. My window stood wide open, the curtains billowing like ghostly apparitions. A shadow loomed over my bed, and the unmistakable cold touch of a gun pressed against my temple. It was Todd, but his eyes were different, devoid of any humanity, replaced by a dark void. His voice, dripping with malevolence, whispered threats, ensuring my silence about our forest encounter. As he retreated, I glimpsed a darker shadow behind him, its eyes a fiery red, seemingly controlling him like a puppeteer. In the weeks that followed, the brothers' behavior grew increasingly erratic. They'd stand outside our windows, their faces blank, but behind them, that dark figure lurked, always watching. The incidents grew more frequent and terrifying, from rocks shattering our windows to whispered threats that chilled our bones. When the day of our move finally arrived, relief washed over me. But Derry's secrets have a way of resurfacing. Years later, upon my return, I uncovered the horrifying truth. The woods were cursed, home to an ancient entity that fed on fear and controlled those who ventured too deep. Eric and Todd had been ensnared by its malevolent grasp, forever changed. And so I pondered, evil is not just a human trait. It's ancient, it's supernatural, and it's always lurking, waiting for its next victim. In the quaint, fog-laden town of Derry, Maine, where the past often mingles with the present, I found myself ensnared in a chilling tale. Fresh out of college, burdened with the looming specter of student loans, I had settled into a rickety old house in a part of town that most locals avoided. The price was a steal, but as I'd soon discover, some bargains come with hidden costs. To my left, a house from which the relentless thud of bass music emanated at all hours. But it was the residence to my right that truly sent shivers down my spine. The house, a dilapidated Victorian-era relic, was home to two women. The elder, a woman in her 60s named Agatha, had a reputation in town. Whispers in the local diner spoke of her rumored dalliances with the occult during Derry's darker days. The younger woman, Eliza, was an enigma. She seemed trapped in a perpetual storm of emotions, her outbursts echoing through our shared walls. Their relationship was shrouded in mystery, but old-timers hinted at a pact made long ago, binding spirits to the living. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows, Eliza's screams pierced the stillness. She thrashed in their overgrown yard, her fingers pointing accusingly at me, her words a garbled incantation. Agatha, with surprising strength, tried to restrain her, her own lips moving in a silent counterspell. I often retreated indoors, the oppressive weight of their presence a constant reminder of the town's haunted history. That fateful night, as the wind howled and the windows rattled, the cacophony from next door became unbearable. Mustering a courage I didn't know I had, I decided to confront them. Agatha answered, her eyes once vibrant, now murky with age and secrets. Before words could form on my lips, Eliza appeared behind her, her face a mask of rage, her voice echoing with the pain of 1,000 lost souls, screaming, "How dare you intrude?" I stumbled backward, the door slamming with a force that seemed supernatural. Sleep eluded me, and the silence from next door was more deafening than any noise. Suddenly, a chilling whisper, like the rustling of old parchment, floated through the air. My heart raced as I sought its source. Then, illuminated by the ghostly glow of my phone, I saw it. Eliza's face, pale and contorted, her eyes devoid of life, her mouth